What started with 24 hours has now turned into half a year. Donald Trump's famous promise to put an end to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine now might seem unrealistic even to the US president himself. In a rather harsh reality check, Trump said a 6-month timeline was more realistic for ending the war.
The worst possible scenario would be surrender of Ukraine. And that's the 24-hour scenario, where basically, the US has leverage over Ukraine and the EU in terms of support and doesn't have much leverage at the moment over Russia, which means accepting the Russian demands and putting pressure on Ukraine to accept Russian demands. That's why the 24-hour scenario is the worst scenario possible for Ukraine. So the sign that they are talking now about 6 months or 3 months suggests that they will be building leverage over Russia, and that's why they need time.
Milovanov says there are signs that this leverage is being built now, possibly in coordination between the administrations amid Biden's last-ditch attempt to confiscate $300 billion of Russian assets.
But the news is not in the attempt to confiscate, but in the fact that it is last ditch suddenly, which is coordinated, if you look at the news, with the Trump administration. Basically, it's signaling to Russia that we're going to try to find leverage over you. And if you want your money back, we're willing to haggle over it.
Milovanov says it all indicates that the Trump administration is evolving towards a not so favorable for Russia scenario. But that still does not necessarily mean favorable for Ukraine and the people of Ukraine.
The reality is that we need to look at what people are willing to accept and what people are not willing to accept. What people are not willing to accept is a change of constitution, disarming of Ukraine, or ceding unoccupied territories. What are people willing to accept based on the surveys is some kind of temporary acceptance that we do not control the territories, so some kind of de facto reality. So people are willing to accept reality, but are not willing to surrender.
He says ultimately Putin has to sell it domestically in Russia as a victory, while Ukraine has to sell it domestically as a guarantee against future invasions. And these guarantees would take much more than anything signed on paper, given the previous guarantees promised and then broken by Russia, he says.